All right guys, so after months and months of teasing, we finally have bought a donor car. Yes, we have an engine and a gearbox for the MR2. So this is a Lotus Elise, and it's one of the best sports cars ever made. It's been the benchmark for motoring journalists for decades as to what a lightweight, fun, revvy, awesome sports car should be, and it's been the comparison for years. What a lot of people don't know is it's actually powered by a Toyota 2ZZ engine. Now that same engine was what powered the 7th generation and final Celica that was ever made. So I bought one. So this is my 2000 ZR Celica. As I mentioned, it has the 2ZZ engine that they use in the Lotus. And this is a 6-speed manual, which is the gearbox I wanted as well. And obviously, I'm not interested in the rest of the car. I'm just interested in what's under the bonnet. So all that stuff is gonna go in the back of my MR2, and we're gonna make a baby Lotus for cheap. So I found this car on Marketplace actually about 2 months ago. It's been advertised for a long time, but the guy wanted a bit too much money for it. I hit him up and offered what I wanted and what I thought it was worth, and he went, yeah, nah, I'm not selling it for that. I'm like, okay, no worries. Left him my details, said, if you change your mind, hit me up. In that time, my mate Ben Henrys messaged him and basically haggled him down to the price I wanted to pay, because Benny's amazing and a great haggler. He messaged me and goes, dude, I just got that guy to agree on your price. I'm like, no way. So I finished up work. Scotty let me off a little bit early. Thank you, Scotty. Drove back to Benny's house. We jumped in his car, put his trailer on the back, and we drove all the way over the other side of Melbourne in traffic, which took forever. And went and saw this thing. The guy stuck a jump pack on it. The battery's cactus, but stuck a jump pack on it, took it out in the street, and luckily it was in an industrial area with absolutely nothing around, and I gave it some beans, and this thing is wicked. It is so much fun. I have driven one of these back when I was 19 years old, but I'm a lot older than that now, and I forgot how much fun a little rev happy engine like this is. It redlines at 8,400 RPM, and it makes all its power up the top. A lot of people don't like that. I think that's fun as hell. So you just basically row through that 6-speed manual, screamy engine. It's amazing. It doesn't really do anything until about 6,000 RPM, and then it all kicks in, and it's a lot of fun. And the engine sounds sweet as anything. I got Benny to start it up while it was cold. I had my head in the engine bay, not a rattle, not a squeak, nothing. The engine sounds great. It's got a lot of Ks, 270,000, but you know, it's an old car, it's 2000. It's 24 years old now. But yeah, it sounds great. The gearbox does have a slight crunch going to 3rd and 4th, which is not uncommon for these cars. They pretty much all do it as the synchros wear down. So I will have to stick a couple of synchros in it. A bit of labor involved for me, that's fine. The synchros themselves are like 40 bucks each. They're not expensive. So that is something we'll put on the list. Anyway, you're probably all asking, why would I choose this engine over the plethora of engines that are now available to swap into cars? Well, let's talk about it. Okay, let's start this off, and this is the main reason why I'm choosing this engine and why anybody should choose an engine for their build. Because I want to. And that should really be the final thing, and we should close this video off, but we will go further. If you're building a car for clicks and likes, that's fine. Some people do that. They want to put in a rotary or a big V8 or something in a small car like that, and it gets a lot of likes. I'm building this car for me, and honestly, with the amount of effort I'm putting in, and it's my money, and I have to live with this car once I've finished it, this is the engine I want. I want a rev-happy, fun Toyota engine in my old car, and I think it's going to be wicked. And the people I've spoken to who have done this swap say it is the most fun. And that really should be the only reason. But let's go into a few other reasons why this engine's quite special. Alrighty, let's start with the basics. So this is a 1.8 litre 4-cylinder engine, inline 4 obviously. This has the VVT-Li, so this is basically Toyota's version of VTEC. It has 2 sets of cam lobes, and at a certain RPM, it switches over to the second set of cam lobes. You can hear it audibly when it switches over, just like VTEC, and opens up those valves, gives you way more air, and it's basically a rev-happy engine. All the action happens up top. Super fun. Now, one of the big features of this and why Lotus wanted to use it is it's very, very light. It's an aluminium block, aluminium head, and from the research I've done, it's 115 kilos dry, so it's actually a super light engine. The old 4A GE setup, from what I can tell, is between 130 and 140 kilos, depending on which model 4A GE you got. So substantially lighter and a lot more power. This puts out about 190 horsepower at the flywheel, which, look, to be honest, isn't a ton. You know, my little Subaru I daily drive has way more power than that. But the stock engine in the MR2 is about 110 horsepower, so that's a substantial gain, and one I think will be perfect for that chassis. 200-ish horsepower apparently is a sweet spot for that chassis, so that's awesome. One of the other key features about this engine is the head is designed by Yamaha, just like the 1JZ, the 2JZ, the 3S GTE, and a bunch of other Toyota engines. They got Yamaha in to develop the head, and it's a fantastic bit of machinery. The intake plenum, the exhaust manifold, all that sort of stuff is actually really good from factory. So much so that most people never bother going to aftermarket exhaust or intake manifolds. They're just really well designed and flow really well. Same with the head. Like, there's no point even porting and polishing a lot of these heads unless you're chasing that extra 1 horsepower right up the top, because the heads are so well, they flow so well and they're so well designed. So pretty cool to have a factory engine that works that well. Some other key things for this, it actually has forged crank and forged rods from the factory. The crank is balanced, it's a balanced crank, and all of that, and they're all lightweight components, so that's one of the reasons it revs so happily. Now, one of the, depends which way you look at it, the ups or downsides of this engine, because it's an aluminium block, it has a special heat-treated bore cylinder. Now, I'm gonna have to look at my piece of paper here to have a look at what it was called. It's a metal matrix composite cylinders. So it's a special treated cylinder from Toyota. The downside is if you damage your bore, you can't hone it. You can't do anything with it. You basically chuck that block in the bin, you go get another one. Unlike steel blocks where you can just hone it, put some oversized rings in it, and you're good to go. So that is a downside, but it also means because that's an alloy block, it's very lightweight, and that's key for this engine. And as I mentioned, this is a 6-speed transmission on this car, and I'll be taking the whole lot, engine and transmission, and putting it into the MR2. It's a really nice little gearbox. It's called the C60. As I mentioned earlier, the downside is the synchros do wear out, so I will have to do the synchros on it, but it is a beautiful gearbox to drive. Just driving yesterday, and it's funnily enough, it doesn't actually crunch at high RPM. At 8,000 RPM, it slips into gear, no problem. It's at low RPM, it crunches. So it's not a big deal, we'll sort that out, but it is a really tight, beautiful gearbox to drive. I've never owned a 6-speed gearbox, which is cool. I've only ever had 5 speeds, so this will be my first 6-speed gearbox on the car. Much exciting. Now, the other thing this engine and car has, which I will be bringing along, is this. It has a cruise control system. So I need to take a little bit of wiring out of the dashboard, take this cruise control box and everything, but I'm pretty excited. I do want modern comforts in that car. I do want to drive it, you know, when we go out for jobs, I will drive it interstate. If that car runs as well as I plan, I'm going to take it everywhere when I don't have the kids with me. So cruise control is a must for that. I love cruise control. It stops me getting speeding fines, and it's just a nice way to drive. So we've taken all that system with us, and it's great. That's all part of this car. So that's pretty much it. So what we'll need out of this is the engine, the gearbox, cruise control, the ECU, and the wiring harness and the fuse box. Take all that with us, move that over to the new car, and then it's not that many wires and it should fire up. So speaking of swapping all this into the AW11, let's talk about what's needed. So it's a relatively easy swap, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to go with this car and this engine. Number one, it's been done before. This is the first time I'm actually swapping an engine into a car that was never supposed to be there. So I've done lots of engines out and all that, but I've always put in the engine that was designed for that car. So I don't want to do it on hard mode. Let's do it easy. This has been done. I've spoken to a few people who have done it. It is a relatively easy swap. So in terms of mounting the engine, it uses 4 mounts. So it's got 3 on the gearbox and 1 on the engine. The 3 mounts on the gearbox, you can use manual AW11 mounts. They'll bolt up and that will bolt straight in the car on that C60 gearbox. So that is half the battle done there already. For the engine side mount, I can make my own, or there is a company in England that does make them. So I'm still tossing up whether I have a crack at making my own or I just buy one. But with the exchange rate, it's pretty expensive. After that, we need drive shafts. Luckily, the drive shafts from a SW20, the second generation MR2, from the NA model, go into that gearbox, and the other ends go into the AW11 hubs, and they're the right length. It's amazing. It's Toyota Lego, man. So I've already got a set of those. I got a set online and they're sitting in the shed. They're in good condition. Just need to get new crown nuts for them. So that's great. So we've got the drive shafts. Electronics wise, basically, as I said, we bring the ECU and the wiring over. It's about 10 wires to splice in, a little bit of jiggery pokery, and it should be all the power it needs to run. And it's because it's running off its own ECU, its own fuse box. It should be pretty good, and then we just need a few wires for it to talk to the car and things like that. Now, then after that, you've got some hoses and things, obviously water lines, but it's not a big deal. Basically, our radiator pipes from the back of the car come up. We just need to figure out a hose that goes from that to the car. It's not the end of the world. Fuel system is a little different. The fuel system on this is a deadhead system, whereas the fuel system on the AW11 is a return system. So that means the fuel goes through the fuel rail and returns back to tank. This one, the fuel pushes up from the tank, goes to the rail, and then it just stops there. So luckily we have our parts from Raceworks. We have a fuel pressure regulator and all the fittings from Raceworks. I've already sorted all them out, which means I can convert the AW11 to a deadhead system, which will work directly with this engine. Problem solved. It's amazing. What else do we need? Well, I think that's almost it. Then obviously an exhaust I'm going to make my own exhaust for this car. Yeah, I think that's it. Let's have a look at my little cheat sheet. But I think that's just about it. Yeah, that's honestly about it. So yes, it sounds simple. Obviously there will be hurdles and things that won't work, but at least it's been done before and there are people I can lean on. There's even a Facebook page dedicated to this swap, this engine into that car, which is great. So there's people on there that know what they're talking about who can help me out. Okay, so lastly, let's talk about a couple of things that need to be done to this engine before I put it in the car. We'll go over this in more detail when I actually do it. But a couple of things that need to be addressed on this engine. The oil pump gears can fail at high RPM. So I've already found a company, there's 2 companies in the United States that make billet oil pump gears for this. I've got one already bookmarked. It's going to cost me about $300 delivered, but they're proper billet oil pump gears. They will be awesome for that. Straight on there. Because this is an older model Celica, the water pumps aren't as good as the later model one. So literally I just order a later model water pump from Toyota, bolt that on there, and that gives us more flow because obviously we are pumping water all the way from the back of the car, around the radiator and back. So we just need a good, strong water pump. And then the big one. So if you go to race days or you talk to people on forums who don't know much about these cars, they'll bitch that they die out on track. A bit like a new BRZ actually. They'll go, oh no, they grenade the engines and all that sort of stuff. And there's a big reason for that is the oil sump on this car is not baffled at all. For some reason, the 1ZZ, basically the crappier version of this engine, had a fully baffled oil sump. This one doesn't, has no baffles at all. So when people take them out on track and do high Gs, that oil sloshes away from the pickup, you lose oil, and then goes, yeah, big end bearings and everything. So it is a flaw with this engine. However, it's not something that's impossible to fix. I can buy a baffled sump from Moriso, you know, like any of the big sump companies. There's a couple that make them, but they are really expensive. We're talking like $1,000 American for a sump. I can't pay that. I just refuse to. However, I do have a welder. So I am going to, once the engine's in the car and I can see how much clearance we've got, I plan to cut the bottom off the sump. I'm going to expand it out and give us a bit more oil capacity, and then I will put in baffles with trapdoors and everything, proper race car stuff, and make it a proper baffled sump to give this engine the best chance of living. Because even though I'm not going to be racing this car, I do want to do track days and stuff and have spirited drives around the hills, and I do not want to have to worry about oil starvation. I will also be running a oil pressure gauge on the dash just to keep an eye on that sort of stuff. So that's something we will have to do with this engine. Other than that, it's just going to get a bit of a birthday. We're going to give it, you know, new seals and gaskets, all the stuff you should do to an engine before you put it in a car, new plugs, all that sort of stuff. Just make sure it's happy. We'll flip it over, we'll check out the big end bearings, make sure they're looking happy. But it sounds sweet as pie. I will try and start it for you in this video. Unfortunately, that battery is super duper cactus and I don't have a jump pack. So I'll have to move the Liberty over and try and jump it for you so you can hear this engine. Yeah. I'm excited, guys. This is exciting. I've had this in mind. When I bought that MR2, this is a swap I wanted to do. I've always loved this car. I've always loved these engines. The Sleek is a little bit ugly, to be honest. It was the ugliest Sleek they made, except for maybe the second generation. But to have this set up in my MR2, I think will be just so cool. Alrighty, I've moved in the shed because it's just started to rain. So we're in here with the AW again. And we've got this nice engine bay where our 2ZZ is going to go. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why am I running this engine over other engines? I've told you why I like this engine, but why run it over other engines? So let's start with the big one. Because we're on the internet, everyone's going to go K-swap. Yes. Now, the K series engines are fantastic. And I know a guy who lives not far from me. He unfortunately just sold the car, but he had an AW11 with a K series engine in it, and it is a rocket ship. Now, they are brilliant engines. They are reasonably cheap, but not as cheap as people think. You really have to kind of keep an eye on Marketplace for a Honda Accord Euro that's been trashed or whatever. But look, they have a ton of power, they're a good engine, and they're fantastic. However, the 2ZZ has been documented. We know it's a known entity. We know how to get in this car. We know how to make it fit. Yes, people have done the K-swaps, but it's not quite as simple. A lot of the mounts have to be fabricated. Drive shafts aren't as simple. There's a few things that make it not quite as easy. And as I mentioned before, this is my first engine swap, putting a non-standard engine in a car. Let's not do it on hard mode. And there will be people that just go, yeah, you should have K-swap, and then keep pushing that matter. At the end of the day, as I said, it's my car. I love that 2ZZ engine, and I think it's perfect for this car. It is pretty much the spiritual successor to the 4AGE, and you ask a lot of Toyota people, they go, yeah, it really is. It's the high revving, small displacement, 4-cylinder engine that if Toyota built this car when that engine was available, that engine would have gone in here, no doubt. So yeah, as cool as a K-swap would be, it's not for me. Now the next one, 3S GTE. So the 3S GTE came in the GT4 Celica. I've owned 2 of those. Great engine. They also came in the second generation turbo MR2. And it is a swap that people do on this car. Now, there's a couple of reasons I don't want to go that route. Number one, I don't want to go turbo. I know people who go, whoa, go turbo. I have a Sora with a 1JZ in it in the shed next door. And once I finish this car, we're going to do some work on that. That thing is a weapon. It's a brilliant engine, a brilliant car. My daily is a turbo. I want a high revving, naturally aspirated car. I love naturally aspirated induction noise, and that is muffled by turbos. I love the sound, and this car isn't all about speed. It's about the experience. It's about driving a lightweight sports car with a revving engine. It's more important than what it can do down a quarter mile or who I can beat away from the traffic lights. I don't care about any of that stuff. I want a car that I'm going to enjoy driving. For that reason, I don't want a turbo engine. Also, the 3S GTE is a heavy engine. It's a cast iron block, which makes it so good to tune. But they're heavy and they're also not cheap anymore either. They're getting rarer and rarer and they're getting quite expensive. So for that reason, no 3S GTE. Now the next engine is an engine I actually love, and my mate Travis has one, which will be going in one of his MR2s, which is the 2GRFE, which is a V6 from Toyota. And it is a ripper engine. It's highly underrated. They did come supercharged from the factory in one of their Orion Sport supercharged cars, and they made a ton of power. And honestly, from the factory, you can stick a turbo on it and make a bucket load of power. They're brilliant. But obviously, being a V6, it is a much bigger and heavier engine. Not a heap heavier, it's actually fairly light for what it is. But I did speak to somebody who had done that swap on this car. And he said it is fun, it is fast, it's wicked, but it ruined the car. He said he's had a few MR2s and he goes, because of that extra weight at the back and that so much power, he found it's not as enjoyable to drive. He didn't want to take it out in the mountains and have fun like that. He goes, away from the lights and at the drag strip and stuff, it's wicked, but I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't like drag racing, it doesn't interest me. Around the mountains and stuff, he said, hey, you know, it's pushed the weight a lot further back, it's kind of ruined the balance. Some people won't agree, but I've spoken to people that have done it, well, at least one dude has done it, and he said if he had his time again, he actually would have done the 2ZZ because it would have been a more fun car. Now, I'm sure there are a million other engine suggestions out there. Hell, you could even do like a Ford EcoBoost, or, you know, we could do the 4AGE or the 4AGZE, the supercharged version, and put it in here. But I just want to do the 2ZZ. I've always liked that car. I've always liked that engine. I love this chassis. I think this will be a match made in heaven. So it's my car and I'm just going to do it. And if you don't agree, you are welcome to go buy an AW11 and go buy that engine and slap them together. Come over to my house, we'll drive both of them, and I'll happily admit if your car is better than mine. No problem at all. But unless you're willing to do that, let's stick with my plan of doing the 2ZZ. All right, well, we can't finish this video off without starting it. So I've got my Liberty here. We'll get the jump leads on this thing, and hopefully we can start her up. Well, we know the alternator's good because that battery's dead as a donut. Now, I'd love to take her for a drive for you because she runs amazing, but obviously unregistered. I'm in a bit of a busy neighborhood with a lot of speed humps, so I don't think we'll be doing that today, but she works. And yes, trust me when I say, when I drove it, it was fantastic. It ran through the reds beautifully, it didn't skip a beat. So with a little bit of a birthday, fix up a few little things on it, get those synchros sorted, it is gonna make for a wicked engine and gearbox in our MR2. And I'm very excited to finally share that with you because I've had this in the back of my mind of wanting to do this since I bought the MR2 basically. So it's nice you now know what's going on. Anyway, we're going to keep this car together until the MR2 is painted. Once the MR2 is painted, then we can start putting everything back in it. We'll take the engine out of this, and anybody watching who wants a full running Celica shell will obviously take the engine and gearbox out and the cruise control. Everything else you can have real cheap. So hit me up if you're interested. Could make a fun little project, or if you've got a car that's been in a crash, transfer your engine and gearbox into it. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'm very excited. Please tune in for the next one. We'll get this thing running.